Imagine loving someone so deeply that when they die, you reshape the entire Roman Empire to immortalize them. Emperor Hadrian didn't just mourn his beloved Antinous. He declared him a god, built cities in his name, and commissioned thousands of statues that still haunt museums today. But this wasn't just a story of power and devotion. This was a love affair that scandalized Rome, defied every social convention, and ended in a mystery so dark that historians still debate what really happened that night on the Nile River. When Antinous drowned at just 19 years old, an emperor's heart shattered, and the ancient world would never be the same. Before we begin, I need to ask you something. If you're fascinated by real LGBTQ+ history, stories of love that refuse to be erased, even by time itself, subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us uncover these buried truths and share them with the world. And drop a comment. What historical LGBTQ+ figure do you want to hear about next? Now, let me take you back to the year 123 AD, when an emperor met a boy who would become his entire universe.
The Roman Empire in 123 AD was the most powerful civilization the world had ever known, stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, and at its center stood Emperor Hadrian, a man of contradictions. At 47 years old, Hadrian was considered one of Rome's greatest emperors. Brilliant, cultured, obsessed with Greek philosophy and art, he was a warrior who preferred poetry, a ruler who spent more time traveling his empire than sitting on his throne. He wore a beard in the Greek fashion, scandalous for a Roman emperor, and surrounded himself with artists, philosophers, and beautiful things. He was also desperately lonely. Hadrian's marriage to Sabina was a political arrangement, cold and loveless. They hadn't shared a bed in years. She moved through the imperial palace like a ghost, performing her duties with icy perfection while despising the man she was forced to call husband. The feeling was mutual. But Hadrian had a secret that Roman society grudgingly accepted, at least for men of power. He loved men. Specifically, he loved young men in the Greek tradition. Rome tolerated this as long as the emperor maintained certain appearances, performed his marital duties, and didn't become too attached to any particular lover. Hadrian was about to break every one of those rules. It happened during one of his endless tours of the empire. In the autumn of 123 AD, while traveling through Bithynia, a province in what is now Turkey, Hadrian's entourage stopped at a small estate. The local aristocrats presented their sons, hoping to curry favor with the emperor. That's when Hadrian saw him. Antinous was barely 13 years old, with dark, curly hair that caught the Mediterranean sunlight, olive skin smooth as marble, and eyes like pools of honey. But it wasn't just his beauty that stopped Hadrian in his tracks. It was something deeper, an intelligence in those young eyes, a quiet grace, a sadness that mirrored Hadrian's own. "What is your name?" Hadrian asked, his voice softer than anyone had heard it in years. "Antinous, my lord," the boy answered, bowing his head respectfully. "Look at me." Antinous raised his eyes, and in that moment, something shifted in the universe. Hadrian felt it, a recognition, as if he'd been searching for this person his entire life without knowing it. "Would you like to see Rome?" Hadrian asked impulsively. The boy's face transformed with wonder. "More than anything, my lord." Hadrian turned to his father. "I wish to take your son into my household. He will be educated, cared for, and given every opportunity. You have my word as emperor." The father could hardly refuse. Within a week, Antinous was traveling to Rome with the imperial court, his life forever changed. But Hadrian waited. Despite what gossip-hungry Romans would later claim, he didn't touch the boy, not then. Antinous was a child, and Hadrian, for all his flaws, had boundaries. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He fell in love.
Over the next 4 years, Hadrian oversaw Antinous's education personally. The boy learned Greek, Latin, philosophy, music, poetry. He studied the great thinkers, trained in athletics, learned to ride horses and hunt, and through it all, Hadrian watched him grow, not just physically, but intellectually, emotionally. They talked for hours about everything, the nature of beauty, the meaning of death, whether the gods truly existed. Antinous had a mind that challenged Hadrian, questioned him, made him think. The emperor found himself looking forward to these conversations more than any state business. "Do you believe in the gods, my lord?" Antinous asked one evening as they stood on a balcony overlooking Rome, the city glittering with torches below them. "I believe in what we make of ourselves," Hadrian replied. "The gods are stories we tell to make sense of chaos." "Then what happens when we die?" "We return to the void from which we came," Hadrian said. But his voice held a sadness that made Antinous look at him sharply. "You fear death, my lord." "I fear meaninglessness. I fear being forgotten." Antinous smiled, a beautiful, heartbreaking smile that made Hadrian's breath catch. "No one will ever forget you. You're the emperor of the world." "Empires fall, Antinous. Statues crumble, names fade. In 1,000 years, will anyone remember that Hadrian once lived and loved and suffered?" "I will remember," Antinous said with the absolute certainty of youth. "I will always remember." It was on Antinous's 17th birthday that everything changed. They were at Hadrian's villa in Tivoli, a sprawling paradise of gardens, pools, and marble buildings that the emperor had designed himself. Hadrian had thrown a small celebration, just a few close friends and advisors. As the evening wore on and the guests departed, Hadrian found Antinous alone in the gardens, sitting by a fountain looking up at the stars. "You should be celebrating," Hadrian said, sitting beside him. "I am. This moment, with you, this is all I want." Hadrian's heart clenched. "Antinous, I know what people say," the young man interrupted, turning to face him. "I know how they whisper, that I'm your pet, your plaything, that I use my beauty to manipulate you." "Let them talk, but they don't understand," Antinous continued, his voice passionate. "They don't understand that I love you. Not your power, not your wealth. You, the man who talks to me about philosophy for hours, who remembers that I love figs, who looks sad when he thinks no one is watching." Hadrian couldn't breathe. "You're young. You don't know what you're saying. I'm 17, old enough to fight in your legions, old enough to die for Rome, old enough to know my own heart." Antinous moved closer, his eyes shining in the moonlight. "I have loved you since I was 13 years old. Every day that love has grown, and I'm tired of pretending it's something else." "If I touch you," Hadrian said, his voice rough with emotion, "everything changes. There's no going back." "Then don't go back," Antinous whispered. "Move forward with me." Hadrian kissed him. It was tender and desperate, and years of longing compressed into a single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. "Come with me," Hadrian said, taking Antinous's hand. That night in Hadrian's private chambers, they became lovers. And it was nothing like the casual encounters Hadrian had experienced before. This was sacred. This was transformation. This was two souls recognizing each other across the void. In the morning, as dawn light filtered through silk curtains, Antinous lay in Hadrian's arms, tracing patterns on Hadrian's chest. "What are you thinking?" Hadrian asked. "That I never want to leave this moment, that I want us to be like this forever." "Forever is a long time," Hadrian said with a sad smile. "Not long enough," Antinous replied.
and he had no idea how prophetic those words would be.
The years that followed were the happiest of Hadrian's life. Antinous became his constant companion, traveling with him throughout the empire. They visited Greece, Hadrian's beloved Greece, where they walked the same paths as ancient philosophers, made love under olive trees, and debated the nature of existence while watching sunsets over the Aegean Sea. Roman society watched with varying degrees of disapproval and fascination. It was one thing for an emperor to have male lovers. That was expected, even celebrated in certain circles. But Hadrian's devotion to Antinous went far beyond acceptable bounds. He didn't just bed the young man, he loved him openly, publicly, shamelessly. "You're making us vulnerable," warned Hadrian's closest advisor during a private meeting. "The Senate whispers. They say you've become weak, besotted, that you neglect your duties for a boy." "Let them whisper," Hadrian replied coldly. "I've expanded this empire, secured its borders, built cities, reformed laws. My legacy is secure. What I do in my private life is my affair. There's nothing private about it when you commission statues of him in every city, when you write poetry about him that everyone reads, when you look at him like he's the sun and you're orbiting around him. Because he is, and I am." But there was truth in the warning. Hadrian's obsession with Antinous was becoming legendary. He commissioned hundreds of busts and statues of his lover, more than any other private citizen in Roman history. Artists captured Antinous from every angle: Antinous as Dionysus, Antinous as Apollo, Antinous as various Egyptian gods. The young man's face became one of the most recognizable in the empire. Coins were struck with Antinous's profile. Poems celebrated his beauty, and Hadrian, the most powerful man in the world, made no secret of his devotion. But Antinous himself remained humble, almost troubled by the attention. "I don't understand why you do this," he said one evening as they reviewed yet another marble bust of him. "I'm just me. I'm not a god. I'm not special." "You're everything," Hadrian corrected, pulling him close. "You're the only thing that makes this bearable." "What do you mean?" Hadrian was quiet for a long moment. "Being emperor is a prison, Antinous. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone lies, flatters, schemes. Everyone except you. When I'm with you, I'm not Emperor Hadrian. I'm just a man who loves another man. Do you understand how rare that is? How precious?" Antinous kissed him softly. "I understand. I just wish..." "What?" "I wish we could be normal. Just two people who love each other, without the weight of the empire watching every move." "In another life, perhaps," Hadrian said wistfully. "In another life, we'd be shepherds in Greece, growing old together under the sun." "I'd like that," Antinous smiled. But there was something in his eyes, a shadow that Hadrian couldn't quite read. As Antinous approached his 19th birthday, something began to change. Hadrian noticed it but couldn't name it. His lover grew quieter, more contemplative. Sometimes Hadrian would catch him staring into the distance with an expression of profound sadness. "What's wrong?" Hadrian asked repeatedly. "Tell me what's troubling you." "Nothing," Antinous always replied. "I'm just thinking." But it was more than that. The truth was that Antinous had been consulting with oracles and mystics, asking about Hadrian's fate. The emperor had been suffering from various ailments, nothing serious yet, but Antinous could see how Hadrian aged, how the weight of empire wore on him, and the oracles had whispered dark prophecies. A great sacrifice would be required to preserve the emperor's life and the empire's prosperity. Antinous, with the passionate idealism of youth, began to believe he understood what that meant. In October of 130 AD, Hadrian organized a journey up the Nile River in Egypt. It would be a grand tour. Dozens of courtiers, philosophers, artists,
all traveling in luxurious barges, exploring the ancient wonders of a civilization even older than Rome. Antinous, now 19, seemed particularly excited about the journey. Egypt, where gods are born, where immortality is more than a dream, he told Hadrian as they boarded the imperial barge. "You've been reading too much mystical philosophy," Hadrian teased, but he was pleased to see Antinous enthusiastic again. They sailed up the Nile, stopping at temples and monuments. Hadrian was in his element, discussing ancient architecture, commissioning surveys, planning improvements, and Antinous was by his side, beautiful and attentive as always. But several courtiers noticed something odd. Antinous spent long hours in private consultation with Egyptian priests. He asked strange questions about sacrifice, about the nature of divine transformation, about whether a human could become a god through an act of supreme love. On October 24th, the imperial barge was anchored near the town of Hermopolis. There would be a celebration that evening: music, wine, dancing under the stars. That afternoon, Hadrian and Antinous stood together at the rail, watching the Nile flow past, ancient and eternal. "Promise me something," Antinous said suddenly. "Anything. Promise me you'll remember that everything I do because I love you, even if you don't understand it at first." Hadrian frowned. "That's an odd thing to say. Just promise me." "I promise," Hadrian said, pulling him close. "But you're worrying me. What's this about?" Antinous kissed him, a kiss that tasted like goodbye, though Hadrian didn't recognize it at the time. "I love you," Antinous whispered, "more than anything in this world or the next." "And I love you," Hadrian replied, "forever." That night, while the celebration raged on the barge, Antinous slipped away. No one noticed immediately. The music was loud, the wine flowing. It wasn't until an hour had passed that Hadrian realized his lover was missing. "Antinous?" he called, searching the barge. "Antinous!" Panic set in. The entire ship was searched. And then someone noticed. One of the small boats was missing. "He must have taken it to shore," someone suggested. But Hadrian knew. With a terrible certainty that turned his blood to ice, he knew. "The water," he said. "Search the water." They found Antinous's body at dawn, floating face down in the Nile, his dark curls spreading around him like a halo. He had drowned, and Emperor Hadrian's agonized scream echoed across the water, a sound of such pure anguish that those who heard it never forgot it for the rest of their lives.
They pulled Antinous's body from the Nile as the sun rose, painting the sky blood red. Hadrian collapsed beside the corpse, pulling the lifeless form into his arms, water and tears mixing as he rocked back and forth. "No, no, no," he kept repeating, as if denial could reverse death itself. "Not him! Not him! Take me instead! Take me instead!" His advisors stood frozen, horrified. No one had ever seen the emperor like this, utterly broken, keening like a wounded animal, clutching his dead lover as if he could pour life back into him through sheer force of will. The official report would state that Antinous accidentally fell from a small boat and drowned, but whispers began immediately, spreading like poison through the court. It was suicide, some said. The boy knew he was aging, knew the emperor's interest would fade. He chose death over abandonment. It was sacrifice, others insisted. The mystics told him the emperor would die unless a life was given in his place. He drowned himself to save Hadrian. It was murder, the darkest rumors suggested. Empress Sabina had him killed out of jealousy, or the Senate, tired of the scandal, or Hadrian himself, disposing of a lover who had become inconvenient. The truth died with Antinous in the Nile,
But what happened next would ensure the young man's immortality. Hadrian went mad with grief. For 3 days, he refused to leave Antinous's side. The body had to be preserved in the Egyptian manner, but Hadrian wouldn't let the embalmers touch him. Finally, his advisors had to physically restrain the emperor while the necessary rituals were performed. When Hadrian finally emerged from his chambers, he was transformed. The grief-stricken man had become something else, an emperor with a mission that bordered on obsession. Antinous was a god, Hadrian announced to his stunned court. He sacrificed himself to save Rome, to save me, and I will ensure the world never forgets him. His advisors tried to reason with him. My lord, you cannot simply declare someone a god. I am the emperor of Rome, Hadrian interrupted, his voice cold as death. I can do whatever I wish. Antinous died in Egypt, where gods are made. His sacrifice transforms him. The cult of Antinous begins now. And so it did. Hadrian's grief became the engine of an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. He founded a city at the exact spot where Antinous drowned, naming it Antinopolis. It would be a Greek-style city in the heart of Egypt, with temples, theaters, and games held in Antinous's honor.
He commissioned an oracle there, where priests delivered prophecies in Antinous's name. Pilgrims came from across the empire to pray to the deified youth. But Hadrian wasn't finished. He ordered statues of Antinous to be placed in every major city of the empire. Temples were built to rededicated to Antinous. Athletic games were established in his name. Constellations were renamed after him. Flowers that bloomed along the Nile where he died were called Antinous's tears. The Roman Senate was horrified. Deifying emperors after death was one thing. It was political theater, a way to legitimize succession. But deifying a private citizen, especially one who had been the emperor's male lover? It was unprecedented, scandalous, blasphemous. "You're making a mockery of Roman religion," one brave senator dared to say. Hadrian's eyes were dead when he responded. "I'm making sure that in 2,000 years, people will still know that Antinous existed, that he was loved, that he mattered. Can you say the same about yourself?" The senator had no answer. More than 2,000 statues and busts of Antinous were commissioned, more than any figure in ancient history except Augustus and Hadrian himself. Every corner of the empire saw his face. Antinous as Bacchus, god of wine. Antinous as Osiris, Egyptian god of the afterlife. Antinous as Apollo, god of beauty. Museums today are still filled with these images. The British Museum, the Louvre, the Vatican, collections in Athens, Rome, Istanbul. Everywhere you look, Antinous stares back with those same sad, beautiful eyes. Hadrian wrote poetry about his lost love, verses so raw with grief that they made readers uncomfortable. "I weep for Antinous, and I weep like a woman, though I know neither prayers nor gods will bring him back. But I make him divine so that all will know. This love was real. This loss was absolute." His travels continued, but now they had a different purpose. He visited every site associated with Antinous's memory, performed rituals, commissioned monuments. In Athens, he founded the Antinous Games, which would continue for centuries. Empress Sabina watched all this with cold satisfaction. "He never loved me like that," she remarked to her ladies-in-waiting. "He never even saw me, but now he knows what it feels like to love and lose." The Senate muttered about succession. Hadrian had no children, no direct heir. His obsession with a dead boy was preventing him from securing the empire's future. But Hadrian didn't care. The empire could crumble. Rome could fall. All that mattered was that Antinous be remembered. Do you think he would have wanted this? All these statues, this worship? He was a modest boy. He might have been horrified by all this attention. Hadrian's face crumbled. For a moment, the grief broke through his obsessive determination. He asked me to remember that everything he did because he loved me. Those were his last words to me. And I failed him. I didn't protect him. I didn't save him. So yes, maybe he would hate these statues, these temples. But it's all I have left. Don't you see? If I stop building monuments to him, what do I have? Just an empty bed and memories that fade a little more each day. My lord, he was 19 years old, Hadrian continued, tears streaming down his face. 19. He should have had a lifetime ahead of him. Children, grandchildren. He should have grown old under the Greek sun. And instead he's dead, and I'm here. And the only thing I can do is make sure no one ever forgets that he existed, that we existed, that this love was real. Years passed. Hadrian's health declined. He developed the illnesses that would eventually kill him: dropsy, repeated hemorrhages, depression so severe he attempted suicide multiple times. "I want to die," he told his doctors. "Why won't the gods let me die? Haven't I suffered enough?" But death wouldn't come quickly. Hadrian lingered for years, sick and miserable, surrounded by statues of the only person he'd ever truly loved. On his deathbed in 138 AD, 8 years after Antinous's death, Hadrian's last coherent words were, "I'm coming, beloved. Wait for me." He died with Antinous's name on his lips. But the story didn't end there.
Emperor Hadrian was buried with imperial honors, his ashes placed in the massive mausoleum he had built in Rome, the building we now call Castel Sant'Angelo. His reign was remembered as one of relative peace and cultural flourishing. But it was his love for Antinous that truly made him immortal. The cult of Antinous didn't die with Hadrian. In fact, it grew. For over 300 years, across the Roman Empire and beyond, people worshipped Antinous as a god. Temples remained active. Festivals continued. Prayers were offered. Why? What made this young man's death resonate so powerfully? Perhaps it was the universal nature of the story, a powerful person loving someone they couldn't save. The wealthy discovering that money and power are meaningless against death. The age-old tragedy of youth cut short. Or perhaps it was something more transgressive, more revolutionary. In a society where same-sex relationships existed but were rarely celebrated, where love between men was tolerated but not immortalized, Hadrian had done the impossible. He had forced the entire Roman world to acknowledge that his love for Antinous was as real, as profound, as worthy of divine status as any heterosexual love story. He had, in essence, created the world's first widely recognized LGBTQ+ icon. Cities across the empire, from Greece to Egypt, from Asia Minor to Italy, maintained Antinous cults. People prayed to him for various reasons. Young lovers asked for his blessing, those mourning lost partners sought comfort, and remarkably, early LGBTQ communities seemed to gravitate toward his worship. Ancient texts mention that those who loved as Hadrian loved made pilgrimages to Antinopolis. The young god became a patron saint of sorts for men who loved men, a symbol that their love could be sacred, divine, worthy of remembrance. This continued until the rise of Christianity in the 4th century. As Rome converted, the cult of Antinous became a target. Christian writers attacked it viciously, not just because he was a pagan god, but because of what he represented: the unapologetic celebration of male same-sex love. The emperor's shameful passion, they called it, an abomination made into false worship. Temples were destroyed. Statues were defaced or buried. The name Antinous was meant to be erased from history, just another pagan casualty of Christianity's rise. But here's the beautiful irony. They failed. They failed because Hadrian had commissioned so many statues, built so many monuments, spread the story so far and wide that it couldn't be completely erased. Statues were buried, but not destroyed. Texts were hidden, but not burned. The memory persisted in fragments, waiting to be rediscovered. And it was rediscovered. When archaeologists began excavating Roman sites in the 18th and 19th centuries, they kept finding the same face, a beautiful young man with curly hair and sad eyes. At first, they didn't know who he was, but as more statues were found, inscriptions were translated, and texts were pieced together, the story emerged. Hadrian and Antinous became one of the most documented same-sex relationships in ancient history.
Today, you can walk into almost any major museum with a classical collection and find Antinous. The British Museum has over 100 pieces related to him. The Louvre has dozens. The Vatican, ironically the seat of Catholic power, has multiple Antinous statues in its collection, too beautiful and historically significant to destroy. In 2022, nearly 2,000 years after his death, a major exhibition about Antinous toured Europe. Thousands came to see the face of a young man who lived and loved and died in ancient Rome. "Why do you think he still matters?" a journalist asked a museum curator during the exhibition. The curator smiled. "Because Hadrian made sure he would matter. Because this is proof that LGBTQ+ people have always existed, have always loved, have always been important enough that emperors would reshape the world for them. In a time when our history is still being erased, still being denied, Antinous is irrefutable evidence. He's literally carved in stone." Modern LGBTQ+ communities have reclaimed Antinous as an icon. He appears in art, literature, poetry. Couples visit his statues in museums, seeing in his face a reflection of their own loves, their own losses. There's a haunting beauty in the fact that Hadrian's desperate attempt to preserve his lover's memory actually worked. Against all odds, across millennia, through the fall of empires and the rise of religions that condemned everything Antinous represented, the young man's face survived. Every statue is a love letter carved in marble. Every temple ruin is a testament to grief. Every ancient text mentioning Antinous is proof that he was loved so completely that it bent the arc of history. Historians still debate the exact nature of their relationship, some trying to make it more acceptable, claiming it was merely friendship or mentorship. But the evidence is overwhelming. Coins, statues, poems, historical accounts all confirm that Hadrian loved Antinous in a way that scandalized even permissive Roman society. And the mystery of his death remains. Did Antinous fall? Did he jump? Was he pushed? Did he truly believe his death would save Hadrian, fulfilling some prophetic sacrifice? We'll never know for certain, but in a way it doesn't matter. What matters is what came after. An emperor's grief so profound it created a new religion. A love so powerful it survived the death of Rome itself. Today, if you visit the spot where Antinopolis once stood, you'll find ruins scattered across the Egyptian desert. The city Hadrian built in his lover's honor is mostly gone, claimed by time and sand. But in those ruins, archaeologists still occasionally find fragments, a piece of carved stone with Antinous' name, a coin with his profile, a broken statue hand that once reached toward the sky. And in museums around the world, Antinous still watches us with those timeless eyes, eyes that saw an emperor's love, that witnessed the height of Roman power, that closed for the last time in the dark waters of the Nile. He was 19 years old when he died. He's been immortal for nearly 2,000 years. Hadrian got his wish. The world remembered.
And every time someone stands before a statue of Antinous in a museum, every time an LGBTQ+ person finds comfort in knowing their love has ancient roots, every time a historian writes another paper about the most documented same-sex relationship in antiquity, Hadrian's love letter to Antinous continues. Will anyone remember that Hadrian once lived and loved and suffered? The emperor had asked. Yes, we remember. We all remember. Because true love, it turns out, really can be immortal. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that LGBTQ+ love has always existed and always mattered, subscribe to this channel. We need to keep telling these stories, keep uncovering these histories, keep proving that we've always been here. Drop a comment. Which historical LGBTQ+ figure should we explore next? Your suggestions matter. Your voice matters. This history is ours, and together, we'll make sure it's never forgotten again.